In this lesson I want to look at the round kick, because we've looked at front kick, looked at side kick. I don't want to spend a massive amount of time. I think we've talked about most of the details we need for kicks, but I want to bring in the idea of the round kick so that we've kind of completed our basic kick knowledge. You've got to amuse yourself throwing your own toy and catching it. It's getting a bit lion dancey now, it's looking good. So we've learned most of the stuff that we need to know in terms of kicks, but the use of the round kick in Yiquan is not conducive to having a dog right to your feet. Okay, just on cue. So the important concept that we need from within Yiquan is to stop at the centre line, the idea of hit and stop. So we'll know that it's very commonplace now because Muay Thai is so successful. It's like the benchmark for full contact fighting for the most part. So we'll very often see the kick and the swing round like that. That's the most common way of doing it. And that, of course, it's not like it's not in wushu. Usually it's a big jumping round kick like that with the leg tucked up, which I won't be demonstrating today. The swing, kick and swing round, and usually not like that either, not kick down, kick up like that, and then just let the energy spin you around like that. And that contradicts our core Yiquan principle that we want to hit and stop at the centre line like that. Core wushu principle, in fact, it's brought into Yiquan from Shaolin Chuan. It's one of the ancient principles of Shaolin Chuan. One, hit and stop at the centre line. So that then creates some issues. So I mean, there's the technical issue that obviously the idea is when you do that you reveal your back. And there's another reason as well why we don't want this round like that. And that's because we want our weight to lean forward. So we want our weight to, when we hit and stop at the centre line, so part of the movement that the weight is being distributed into the kick. And if you go round like that and your weight is forward, it goes wrong like that. To go round, you've got to keep your body straighter like that. We don't want that. It's not how we're generating force. 1, 2 like that. Got to be straight for that. When you lean in with it like that, you want to do it straight and drop, not. That will be disastrous. What we want instead is to hit and stop at the centre line, and this makes this kick very challenging because we also need to retain our body consistency. So our leg isn't going to lock out. We don't want it to lock out against the knee like that, and we have to maintain this crooked leg like that, so we don't lock out like that. And believe me, after decades of training like this, do yourself a favour, do it like this. Don't lock out against your knees. You need your knees. For those who've got, I know not everyone's got knees. I know that. So we're going to hit and stop at the centre line. So all our other considerations are very similar. So the leg's going to lift higher and higher than it does in a lot of other kinds of martial arts systems. It's going to lift higher, and we're going to turn on the foot like that. When we do this turn, it turns on the ball of the foot like that. The heel comes in like that, and that also does the really useful thing is it shifts our centre of gravity just in a little bit like that. It just shifts the way that we balanced right under the line of the kick like that. So if it's like that, not only is it difficult to do, but more of the weight is over to that side. This just brings all the weight over that much into line with the posture that helps to balance it. All these beautiful the structural symmetry of it all is it's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. It's like everything's a fractal of everything else. It's just, so leg lifts up, and then it hits down like that, and the foot turns. And you can look at the other videos on kicks where it's timing like that. And again, it's the explosive movement off the floor. So lift up, and then the explosive movement around the axis. And this is what we call compound far-leek. So it's not just one, it's explosive movement off the floor like that, and explosive movement of the turning round the central axis, and they've got to be fused together into one movement, like that. This is going to be like explosively round like that. This is going to be explosively up off the floor. And again, it's all about timing because they can't happen at exactly the same time. There's a slight timing difference because obviously the leg's got to get to this point. And when it's about here, then you go with the second far-leek. So far-leek, a little explosion up off the floor here, a little explosion open round the centre line. The quad opens, and this is not quite as far out, it's not quite as straight as the side kick where the body is pretty much straight on like that. It's still a little bit bent round the quad. So the leg's out that way and the quad is still going that way a little bit. And just like with the other kicks, to get this compound far-leek to work, one of the most important useful things we can do is just lift off the floor a little with the movement here. We jump into it a little bit to lift up, take away the friction, because think about it, it's like a far-leek lift off the floor fast and that like that. The timing has got to be so close together to fuse this into one movement, even though they're two different far-leek. It's got to be so close. We need to absolutely eliminate all possible barriers to those getting the perfect timing. And one of the key ways we do that is just lift our weight up a little bit and just jump into it a little bit. And when I say jump, it's not even so much jump as just lift the weight explosively up like that, just enough to take the weight off the foot. So you don't have to actually like leave the floor, or just lift the weight up so the root can float like that round the. Well, you are not being helpful. Float like that round the axis as it turns in. That helps to just fuse those two different far-leeks together into one movement, creating that compound far-leek effects. Again, far more sophisticated than the stuff that, the average chit-chat that you've seen on the internet about far-leek, and what people have convinced themselves is far-leek is just, I don't know. We want to bring enlightenment to the people. What love is that? So I'm afraid here we're so impoverished. This is the only dog toy that we can possibly afford. A small green rag had to be divided with another dog who's got the other half of the small green rag. It's the only thing we've got. Send us dog toys, we need them. So yeah, it creates that compound far-leek effect, which is quite a sophisticated concept. And again, we want a little bit of a lean in when we kick. So just like with the front kick, where we want to lean in a little bit, exactly the same kind of thing. We want to lean in a little bit to counterbalance the weight of the kick. Don't want to be going back too far. There's loads of special cases where we don't do that, I have to say. So one of which is the really long round kick like that, where you see it all the time in sandar, where you're going to use the full extension of the leg and you're going to kick with that part of the foot into the thigh, and you're going to lean back right out of the way of the counter-in fist, and you're going to try and kick in like that. So it doesn't always follow that rule, but for our basic power kick, like we want to just hit into the thigh and take it out clean. We want to lean forward a little bit with the jump into the kick. That helps to balance it, and it helps to absorb the force a little bit and counterweight the force. And it just helps the overall posture of the kick be much more solid structure, because remember, we're on one foot now, so the way, again, like the level of understanding about what rooting is just, again, we want to bring enlightenment to the people. It's like people understand like this, like 100th of a percent, and think, jackpot, that's it, I understand it. Like I do that and you try and move me. Somehow I've got some my chi is connected to the earth and you can't move me or something like that. It's like, I can move you. If not, I'm pretty sure I know someone who can, you know, I'll soon find someone who can. Actually, our understanding of rooting, particularly in Yiquan, is so much more beyond that now. It's so much more, like it's a whole field in itself. Go and look at my whole Art of Rooting series that, you know, I'll probably cover more in this now, but there's so much to this concept. It's a whole scientific field in itself of looking at how we use the feet to add power and structure. But when we're on one leg, this is also needs to be rooted. This is also is rooting. This is also we're connected to the floor. We're lifting from the floor, in fact, and then connecting back to the floor. This also is rooting, so it needs to be strong. The structure, for a split second, needs to be strong to connect with that thing, the other person's leg, presumably. Might not be. Might be an animal that's attacking you. It's got to deal with. And again, just like the front kick, this bit, using the leg like this, the joint movement, that of course also is a kind of explosive movement, but we need to be much more careful with that because we don't want it to be locking out against the bone. So we don't tend to do that in the same kind of explosive way that we're moving around the axis. We don't want to do the same kind of explosive movement with the knee joint, but we can get extra power in from doing that. And you'll feel it when you're doing it on a punch bag, and you'll feel like sometimes like, where can I get a little bit more power from? And sometimes it can, if you feel like everything else is just coordinated really, really well, you're really releasing force, your timing is perfect, and your timing into the compound far-leek is perfect. It can just be that, just adding a little bit more of that, but then you've got to be careful because like a bag is a static target, you know for sure you're going to hit it, so you feel like you can go for it a bit more with that posture, whereas if you do it and you miss, someone's moving, like that's when you can lock out against the knee and really hurt yourself as well, really damage yourself. Also, something else to be said about that is it's not necessarily right to kick with all your might into someone's thigh. And think about the times that this has happened now, sometimes quite famously in MMA, where someone's leg has snapped doing that, where they're kicking into someone's femur and the leg has just snapped. The issue that raises is like, do you really need to do that as hard as you were doing it to get the, you know, to really cause a massive effect in someone's leg? Booting the punch bag as hard as you possibly can. Do you really need to do it at that level of power for a leg? And I think the answer is no, you don't. Again, our bodies are capable of creating so much force, and how many times have I said sometimes the body itself cannot contain that force. It's not strong enough to contain that force. I think that's a really good example, real elite level MMA athletes, and they're boom, and the bone structure is just not strong enough to. It's always a freak accident, and sometimes someone will let in the same place and it's the other person's leg or something that will break or something like that. The body not being strong enough to take the force that it's generating. So after I started seeing a few cases like that, and there's, you know, obviously some very famous cases, I started really thinking about that. Like, it's not necessary, is it? Like, you can get so much power and still control it that it's actually not necessary to do that kick with your absolute full power. Risking the leg break. And once again, we have our lock point, so we lift and down like that. But usually the best way to do these, to practice, is in line drills. Like, and see how I'm keeping my leg bent like that. Line drills like that. Have a look at all the other ideas I've talked around in the other kicking videos, and again, you can just practice like that. Just practice with this little jump onto there. And one of the really important things here is, because the power generation is primarily from this movement around the axis, you're training that for everything, and you don't then need to fetishize like putting a ridiculous amount of power and strain on your leg. So when Wang Shenjia is talking about training really sensibly and really thinking about how you're using your body, Like people thinking like all the power's from the legs, so they're just doing boom, boom, boom. I mean, there's a place for that. I mean, there's videos of me doing that, and there's a place for doing some kind of training like that. When we've reached the 95% point of kind of getting power like this, we can train something else like that, on kick speed and the ability to move from one kick to the other. But for this, to get the actual power, it's this that we need more than that. So we can just practice like quite like that. We don't even need to do that full power, because we want to give our intention as much information about how our body is working as possible to hone it and then bring it up into fuller power. Save your body, save your limbs. The next thing to think about is what we want to kick with. So ideally the shin. Get the shin in like that. And there isn't really any need to do any kind of shin conditioning or anything like that. You know, people rubbing iron bars on their shins. If you just do like kicking a bag, that should be enough. If the bag's sufficiently hard enough, that's enough. You don't want to start damaging your body. You don't want to numb your legs. There's a certain level that you need. And the same for toughening your thighs up for taking round kicks. If you're just doing training exercises that are involving drills and kicking drills, that's plenty enough for building up the thigh strength that you need. The kicks get harder and harder. Just naturally builds up the leg strength step by step, the ability to take an impact. If you can't, you can do things like you can swing a punch bag and then swing the bag into the leg like that. Just be careful. It kind of, a couple of times doing that where it's just kind of twinged my back a little bit, so you've got to be careful. Swing, hit, be more careful on the inside. If you've got to protect your private area so it doesn't get hit. That can do something, or a sandbag where you can hit your legs like that and toughen like that. But nothing really beats even with shin guards on, just that feeling of the narrower thing of the shin getting into nothing beats that for building the resilience in your thighs. Which again feeds into what I was talking about not needing to use your full strength. Most people can't even take one reasonable middle to light power kick to the thigh. Most people just one, and they're just thinking, I don't want that. Two, and add the power, even half power. Most people, that's it. If you get it sweetened with the shin, and it's kind of like the blade of the shin that does the damage. It's kind of a sharp thing, and it just ooh. But you can also kick with you see much more in Sandar, I think, where you kick with this part of the foot here, the instep, and particularly for longer kicks, like kicking like that. And you can use like classic, like using with a step, moving it, keeping your distance like that, and kicking in with the instep. Be careful kicking a bag like that. Something you definitely get all the time when you do that is the foot getting overextended back. Like that. So you've got to pull, I mean, it's so basic, I should have said, isn't it? You should pull your foot back like that. Anyway, don't kick like that unless you're deliberately kicking like that. To kick with could be the point of the foot, or it could be the ball of the foot kicking into the side like that. It's a perfectly legitimate technique, as long as you're careful. But generally speaking, the foot pulls back like that and kick. Like that. On a bag, mostly practice with the shin into the bag. On sparring, you can do a bit of both. No problem. When we do the lead leg, the same considerations just as before. It's compound far-leek, just in the same way. We go one, explode up into two. But you can see there I'm clearly making it two kinds of two structural lock points, and they've got to be fused into a compound far-leek. And again, it's a very similar thing. You don't quite jump up in the same way because there's that much more weight that you need to move than if you're doing like with the back leg. You can push forward jumping off the back leg, but for this, it just feels a lot heavier when you do it. So just a little bit. The heel just jumps a little bit off mostly the jump is from the back leg. It's like when we do this compound far-leek, it's explosive force off the back leg, not off the front leg. And when we do the front leg, it's explosive force off the front leg into there. So we don't actually need to do that jumping exactly the same way. We can just lift a little bit and just turn the heel in like that. When you do the posture, you'll feel it just feels natural. That principle feels natural. And all exactly the same principles apply, including lifting it up a bit higher and kicking down like that. If we're going for the thigh. You can go for other targets as well. There's always dangers, like the more you go for the middle, the more you might hit the elbow, but I mean, there's always something. If you go for the low round kick, you might get punched in the face and knocked back, you know. It's like a circle, there's always something. Some people never understand this, like when BJJ came out and everyone's like, oh, striking is over. And even then I understood, like, nah. Wushu teaches us it's a circle. Whatever you do, there's a counter for it. And now, of course, you know, everything's kind of adapted again and people have got takedown defences and it's quite hard to take down really good, top level, elite level MMA fighters. Of course it happens, but it's so much significantly harder now to do that. The circle just goes round and round and round and round. Then people will adapt to their defences and so on. There's always a counter, always. So think tactically about it. It's like even Sun Tzu had to make a move at some point. Even Sun Tzu had to take a risk that counter might not happen, otherwise you'd just be paralysed with fear. So that's everything we need to learn about. It's not everything we need to learn about round kicks or kicks by any means, but it's everything we need to get going with some basics that we can build on later. So that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. One love, and I'll see you over in the next one.